Awesome. Thanks, Kelly, for inviting us, and thank you, everybody, for coming. One of the things that I love most in the whole world is camp. And one of the camps that I love most in the whole world is Red Pine. And I'm so excited that I get to share a little bit about a camp that means a lot to me and to the friends that I brought with me tonight. So we're going to tell you the story of Red Pine as we know it. If there are some history buffs in the room who know things that we don't know, we definitely want to hear about it. First, I want to say that camp is great, and there are so many camps in this area and across the country, and I think that a lot of people have the kind of attachment to their camps maybe, that we have to ours. So we just wanted to say, like, you might love a different camp, but you probably love it the same way that we love our camp. I spent a lot of my career working for the American Camp Association and often said things like, there is a camp for every camper, but this camp is not the camp for every camper. So keep that in mind. And I think we should introduce ourselves. So Joan, will you start and tell everybody a little bit about your involvement in Red Pine?
Hello, my name is Joan Heenahan. I was at camp for 23 years. I started out 9 years old and just kept going, became a counselor, and then my children came, my two girls, but I have two daughters, so they came and they spent many, many years at camp. And then my two granddaughters came, so we just can't let go.
I think of the three of us, Joan is the one who worked at camp most recently.
Yeah, I used to teach canoeing at camp, which was fun. Take out lots of canoe trips. Really enjoyed that. And I love it up here so much. I moved up here after I graduated college, so I was originally from Illinois. That's me.
Jenny, will you introduce yourself?
I'm Jenny Musson, and I started out at Red Pine when I was, I'm trying to think, 11 or 12 years old, and started coming back every summer after that. I really loved it. And then I became a counselor, and so I was there for really about 10 or 11 years. And I met my first husband there, and
He was a maintenance man.
yeah, or a yard boy. That's what he is. Anyway, his name was Gail Arnett, and he and I were married at Red Pine, out on the point. It was really, really lovely, and just had our family. But anyway, and then he passed away some years later, and then I remarried, so now I'm Jenny Musson. But anyway, I have been connected to camp through my friends and the late Irene Sarah and the late W's over the years, because I ended up living here. So I've been here ever since. So anyway.
You were my counselor.
Who are you?
Amy Hubert.
Oh my God.
Welcome to camp, everyone. This is how it happens.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
60 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm Amanda Zellner, and I was never a Red Pine camper, but I ended up at Red Pine because I grew up in the same town as Joan's family lived in, and her daughters were very good friends of mine. And you can't talk to her daughters without hearing about something that happened at camp. And so I had known them since I was about 5 years old, and I remember saying to my mom, well, why can't Angie and Ellie come over and play during the summer? And my mom explained to me that during the summer they go to camp. They go to a camp where they spend all summer, and then we watch The Parent Trap, and then we read that American Girl book called Molly Saves the Day, which is set at summer camp. And that was sort of the beginning of my love of all things summer camp. And so the moment I was old enough and graduating from high school, I applied to work at Red Pine. And I am fortunate that they hired me. And I spent 7 summers working at Red Pine in various capacities. I I was the counselor with the camper schedule, so I taught drama and arts and crafts and canoeing and mountain biking and nature. And my last couple of years I was the program director, and so I got to make everyone else's schedules. And then I decided that I needed a job that would allow me to continue to work in camp, and I thought I would be a teacher, but it turns out being a classroom teacher is nothing like working at camp. And in fact, that's awful if you're used to working at camp. So I decided that I would try and work in camping year-round. And I didn't work at Red Pine for my full-time year-round camp job. I was living in New England at the time. And then I moved across the country to the Bay Area in California and worked for the American Camp Association for a number of years. And then into the arms of the global pandemic, my spouse and I retired and had to change all of our plans and decided we would come back to the Midwest, and where would I rather be than living 11 minutes down the road from camp. So I've been living up here full-time for almost 5 years, and it feels a lot like being at camp, which is important and special to me. So here is where our camp is located. It looks so paltry on a map. It looks like not very much space at all. But if you head out on Highway J and turn right at the Red Pine sign, you come to Red Pine. It's surrounded by the Northern Highland American Legion State Forest. And if you're out at the Clear Lake day use area or boating around Clear Lake, you sometimes see water skiers and sailors and paddlers from Red Pine, which is fun. The Raven Trail is one of the places where I go hiking all the time, and I always stop and wave at camp. My husband will attest that I do in fact do that every time. And we can see a little bit about what is beautiful at camp. So this is a modern video, but it shows you kind of the extent of what the property looks like today. Beginning, and the founders of Red Pine, Richard and Helen Wittenkamp, who all of us camp people know as Mr. and Mrs. Dubs, or the W's. I had a really fun time finding pictures of them. Mr. W he worked for the Wisconsin Conservation Department as a district forester, and as part of that job, his family lived in Rhinelander, but as part of that job, he had a summer cabin that he and his family would live in on Clear Lake. And he spent his days, so we are told, boating around the lake and getting to know all of the other people who were there. I don't know if this is true, but their granddaughter Robin told me a few years ago that there's a little lake in the McNaughton Trail system off of Highway 47 called Lake Helen. I'm told it was named after Mrs. Wittenkamp, that Mr. Wittenkamp got to name the lake, and so he named it after his wife, which I thought was very sweet. On Clear Lake, prior to 1937, there was a fishing resort on the lake. It was owned by a pair of brothers, Bill and Gus Krogman. And Mr. Wittenkamp let them know that if they ever wanted to sell their fishing resort, he would be interested in buying it. So this is the only picture that we have of Bill and Gus. If anybody who knows the Historical Society people or whatever finds another picture, I'm curious about these guys. I think they must have been characters. In 2007, they had a Red Pine reunion, and some forward-thinking alumna decided to record a bunch of oral history kind of stuff. And so they recorded the current directors and some of their family members and stuff, and asked them just things about camp and what they remembered. And the Wittenkamp's granddaughter, Robin, shared in one of her oral history recordings that she remembered Gus babysitting for her when she was a very small child. And they went fishing, and they cleaned fish, and they grew beans. She was probably, a toddler, 5 or 6 years old maybe at that point. There was a building, even when I was working at camp, that we knew as Gus's house. I'm told it was actually Gus's house. It was a little cabin right on the shores of the lake, just sort of off the back of camp property. That building is no longer there, but somebody saved the door. And so the door is in the camp history cabin at Red Pine. That's where the door came from. So we have a few old pictures of some of the original buildings at camp. Things were pretty sparse back in the day. There was this little boathouse that we can see in the middle. And then the first building where it seems like everything happened in the early years, it was known as the Lodge. That's not there anymore. But this building on the left was apparently originally a cowshed, so the song tells us, and then became the infirmary. And now that building has a second story, and the second story of the infirmary is incredibly luxurious for camp healthcare staff quarters, which I saw for the first time last week. It's only been the second story. 2 years, you said?
A couple of years.
Yeah. There's a little building up on top, above, sort of up a hill, and it's a building that we call Senior Cabin, and our very oldest campers live there. They're a small enough group. It's a really tiny cabin. It's got really low ceilings. It's all upright wood cabins, or logs at either side. This building on the left is the office. It's right kind of at the point looking out over the water. The office also has a second story now. So apparently at camp we don't build out, we just build up, which is kind of fun. This building here is the rec hall. That looks pretty much the same inside and out. I particularly love this picture of Mrs. Wittenkamp in her pencil skirt, and I am assured that she was always wearing a skirt and pumps even when she was working at camp, which is a decision, and good for her.
Decision.
Sarah, the former director, told this story that when her father came home and said, I've bought this girls' camp, Mrs. Wittenkamp said to him, well, what am I going to do with that? And he said, well, you're going to run it. Just for a future note, don't ever come home and tell me you bought a camp. That would never happen. Yeah. So now we're getting to the part of camp that is familiar to me. On the left are Sarah Wittenkamp Raleigh and Irene Boudreau, who were the directors when I was there. Irene is on the left, and Sarah is driving the golf cart in the picture where they're wearing the red shirts. This is very true to my memory. Sarah was always driving the golf cart. Rarely a car, but always the golf cart. And then this picture is, on the right, is Sarah on the left and Irene on the right in some of their early years as staff. Sarah joined the staff at camp in 1953, and she taught activities including riding and swimming, and then by the time Irene arrived, Sarah was working as the secretary. Irene recounted in one of our oral history recordings that she came to Red Pine because she had a college basketball coach. She was from Louisiana. Her coach attended Red Arrow and came north from Louisiana with his family every summer for camp, and introduced Irene to the Witten camps and suggested that she should come and work at Red Pine. She taught tennis and archery, and then later became the program director. I didn't know prior to doing the research for this project that Irene had been the program director, because I was the program director too, and Irene is the one who hired me. She was already retired at that point, but apparently there was a very, very busy year, and so she said she would handle applications and things. And so I remember getting my camp correspondence letters typed on a typewriter from Irene. Sarah and Irene became the directors after the Witten camps retired in 1976, and they served as the directors for, they served Red Pine for 53 years. Wow. So pretty good run. Sarah passed away in 2009, and Irene more recently than that in February of 2020. I remember when that was because the current director called me and said she couldn't come to the American Camp Association conference because she needed to be with Irene. And then there was a third generation of folks who worked at Red Pine. Robin Raleigh Thies, with the brown hair there, is Sarah's daughter, and her then husband, Jim. The two of them came on board as associate directors in 1995 and worked there up until 2007. And of course, that is them with Mr. and Mrs. Witten. I just love her sense of style.
White, old.
I have many feelings about wearing white at camp, but that is the thing that we do. On Sundays, on special occasions, everyone wears white. I was once a counselor for a cabin full of 6-year-olds. You had to put on the whites before lunch on Sunday. Lunch on Sunday was always something with red sauce. Those whites never stayed white very long. So we come to the Witten camp's philosophy. Jenny and Joan both called this out as something that they remembered from camp brochures and talking about camp. That the philosophy is to help each individual develop her potential while learning to accept her limitations. I don't know that we're still saying that in quite the same way at camp now, but I think it's nice that we each get to develop our potential at camp, and that there's a thing at camp that each person can be good at. All right. Now, Jenny, I want you to tell a story about getting to camp and what it was like to ride the train and then later to be the bus supervisor. And you should come up here so that the recording can hear you.
Okay, excuse me. I lived in Evanston, Illinois, outside of Chicago. That's where I grew up. And so when you were coming to camp, most people who were from the Chicago area, or Madison, Milwaukee, because the train would stop, I guess in Milwaukee, maybe Madison too. Anyway, you would ride the train. And the Witten camps rode the train as well. So they met all of their campers starting in Chicago, where the girls from, that western suburbs or the southern suburbs would get on there. And then the train would stop in Evanston, which is where I got on. And then it would go up the lake shore and stop at the different suburbs like Highland Park and all of that. And then Milwaukee and on up. And when we got on the train, and I don't remember if we were given that when we got on or if they sent it to us, but we wore a sprig from a pine bough with a red ribbon, and that was your little corsage, and so you had that pinned to your shirt, your blouse, and you know that.
When you were riding to camp, did you have to wear like nice clothes, or did you put on camp clothes and that was fine?
We wore nice clothes.
Yeah, you have your
We were
travel
all
clothes.
dressed up.
Yeah.
Little box lunch.
Yeah, that's right, and, this is just kind of an aside, it's funny the stuff you remember. I remember, a friend of mine, Amy Fishbein, who got on in Highland Park, and she got on one time with, her lunch was lox, bagel, and cream cheese from the local deli. And she got on with that, and it was like a big deal. And, anyway, but then when we got to, here, we got off at the depot in Woodruff, and you can see that picture, which is no longer there. And then a school bus would meet us and take us to camp. And ironically, that school bus company was owned by my future father-in-law, Dick Arnett, who, you know, I was only 12. But anyway, and he drove, I remember he drove the bus to camp and with all of our luggage on there, anything that came by the train, and took us out to Red Pine. And then later on, I met his youngest son, Gail, and that's the man I married, because he worked at Red Pine. That was kind of a weird thing, that whole, I don't know, connection for way back when. But, and then in later years, as everybody has their, the campers would take planes, and then the train stopped, so then it was a bus that would go down to the suburbs and pick everybody up. So a majority of girls rode the bus and up and then back, or their parents brought them by car, or they took the plane. And I used to do that. I used to take the plane. So.
But then once you were an adult,
Oh, yes.
you got a very special job.
Yeah, so when Gail and I got engaged, he was working at Red Pine. And I don't remember who approached us, but anyway, we were asked to accompany the campers back from camp to Chicago and then places in between. And Mrs. Wiggenkamp, you saw how she dressed. She dressed casual formal. I don't remember that. I don't even know if that woman owned pants. But anyway, she had this, she was teaching all of us etiquette and how to be a lady and, you know, those kind of things mixed into our routine. But one of the things she did was when she rode the train, or I don't even know if she did the bus, but anyway, she wore white gloves. So I'm about to get on the bus, and she comes up to me and hands me a pair of white gloves. And she said, these were not them. They were, you know, the dress gloves that we used to wear when we were kids. Anyway, she said, I want you to wear these when you're meeting the parents. So I had to take this pair of white gloves and put them on when we got to Chicago. So anyway, and greet the parents.
Thank you, Jenny. It was indeed a very different time. The last time I had a pair of white gloves was when I was in marching band. So this map is lovingly painted on the outside of the infirmary, and you see the impression that camp is actually fairly compact. Like it's. We were saying earlier that it isn't actually that big, but it feels like the whole world when you're there, and it feels like you are so remote and far from everything. So I have some cabin life pictures to share with you. There are 16 camper cabins divided into 4 units. The historical picture on the bottom left is Star Cabin, where the youngest campers live. It still looks a whole lot like that. It looked like that when I was a counselor there in the summer of 1999. And speaking of that summer, that picture picture on the upper left is me with my first cabin of campers. Joan took that picture on the first day of that session in 1999. And I don't have a lot of pictures of me at camp, but Joan's younger daughter was in the cabin right next door, so she was bringing her to camp and took that picture for me. The other historical picture there is a pine cabin, which is in the forester unit. Most of the cabins at camp look like that on the outside. They look like camp cabins. But pine cabin is a cabin that all three of us were in at some point in our camp careers. Joan and Jenny as campers and me as a counselor in the summer of 2000. The upper right picture is a modern picture that's currently on the camp website, and that is one of the musketeer cabins. The three musketeer cabins, 1, 2, and 3, were purchased by Mr. Wittenkamp after World War II. They were soldiers' barracks, and they were moved to camp. And they have been remodeled since, but they have these fun, like, screen panels, and then these awful, like, shutters that you push up, and in the middle of a rainstorm, in the middle of the night, as the counselor, you have to run outside in your pajamas and take a broom handle and push them up so that the support will come down and they smack close. It's a very core camp memory for me. We also have some pictures of camp activities. That flag raising picture is from 1945. To my understanding, Red Pine didn't have a uniform, but everybody wore navy blue shorts and white shirts on picture day. So almost all of the pictures that we have of historical camp are from picture day. And so everybody's wearing their navy blue and white. I'm so grateful for the navy blue shorts instead of white shorts all the time. A lot of the same activities still happen at camp, whether it was in 1952 or whatever, or 2024. The docks still look a lot the same. There is no more diving board. I think that's something we really don't do at lakes anymore. This picture here is my picture of camp. That was a bike trip that I took probably in the summer of, I know that t-shirt that I'm wearing. So that means it had to have been the summer of 2000 or maybe 2001.
Can I just interject one thing?
Yeah.
This is just kind of a fun thing. But you can see the counselor who's guarding, she's got red bathing suit on.
Yeah.
Well, when we were there as counselors, we had to wear, all of the counselors in the waterfront wore black bathing suits, black, one-piece suits. And that was the uniform for the waterfront.
I bet they were super stylish black bathing suits too, that you all loved. Yes.
Anyway. So at least they're red now.
So there is a concept and an award that is given at camp called the Red Pine Lady. Mrs. Wittenkamp took tremendous pride in being a lady. You've seen the pictures of her in her skirts and pumps at camp. And that was really important for her to impart to her counselors. She hosted a tea every spring in the Chicago area for incoming campers. And Jenny has one of her original tea invitation letters. Jenny and Joan are both really good at saving all of their camp stuff. And the letter begins, "Come to tea, please do. Bring your mother, father too." Whether you are an old or new camper, we hope you will be able to attend the traditional Red Pine Camp Tea, which serves a number of purposes! Exclamation point. To those of you who are returning Red Pine campers, it provides a reunion with old friends as well as an opportunity to meet new campers. Since each old camper was once new to Red Pine, we know all of you will be happy to serve as official RPC hostesses, doing everything possible to welcome each new Red Pine camper.
And you had to dress up.
I do have one tea-related Mrs. Wittenkamp story. I only ever met her once. She passed away in the fall of 1999, so it was after my first summer as a counselor, but she came to the last day of camp, and I got to meet her then. But when I got married, her granddaughter gave me a pair of her teacups, and they're over there.
Oh.
That was a lovely and very special wedding gift.
That was very cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, they're very nice.
They're apparently from Norway. I don't know if they traveled there or if somebody else traveled there and brought them back, but. At camp, we have a number of traditions, and I expect that many of our traditions are similar to traditions that other camps have. There are weekly, what we call appreciation services, used to be called Vespers, but there are times when the whole camp community comes together for a specific reflections on a specific topic. The oldest campers start. Theoretically, they're the ones who need the least amount of practice leading up to it, and they talk about camp traditions, the pioneer traditions. What do the rangers do? Do you remember? I don't either. I never worked in the ranger unit, so I didn't ever have to run their appreciation services. The Starlets, the youngest campers, their appreciation service is about friendship. And anyone who's gone to camp in the past 20 years still starts to cry hearing any of the selection of friendship-related songs that are played around a campfire circle at Starlit Appreciation Services. And that is where you get your piece of red string that you are supposed to tie around your wrist and wear until it falls off. I went looking today for a red ponytail holder. I did not find any. But in the ponytail holder bag, I found 2 pieces of red string, which are over there in my red pine wine glass. Some of our traditions are adaptations of sorority traditions that were brought in from Mrs. Wittenkamp and some of the other staff over the years. Some of them are sort of vaguely Christian, although Red Pine was non-denominational. And I was shocked to learn that when I came to camp that there were many things that I thought I knew how to do just fine that I didn't know how to do because I didn't do them the Red Pine way. I had to refold my towels and remake my bed in the first 6 hours I was in camp. But I learned how to do it, and now I do it that way all the time. There are also Red Pine words to many folk songs that were popular in the 60s and 70s, and occasionally I will be listening to the radio, and I will hear a song and think, those aren't the words for that song. And because I'm hearing the actual version, I am not hearing the Red Pine version. So that's always fun. Camp is largely non-competitive, but there are achievements to strive for. And every summer, every camper receives an individual award at the end of a 4-week camp session. The awards are handmade by the staff from the bark of birch logs that fall on the property. Jenny and Joan both have a bunch of their birch bark awards back there, so you should go take a look at them. You can see some of the regularly occurring and special ones that are up there getting ready to be handed out. Some awards are traditional, the all-around camper award, or the all-around camper for each unit, or the Red Pine Lady award. But some of them are created as one-offs to honor a particular camper, something that is unique and special about them, and maybe it's a birch bark award that is never given again. You know, there's a long meeting, and there's a whole list of ones that have been given traditionally, but then some of them are special, just because some of the campers have something special that you want to recognize. That picture on the right is from our candlelight ceremony, which is the last night of camp. It includes poems and songs that are sort of unique to our ritual, and then everybody brings their little birch bark candles and floats them in the water at dusk. And it's really special and really lovely. I think there's one of the birch bark candles in the back there, if you haven't seen that yet. It is a part of camp that's always just a little bit magical. So we talked about how the Red Pine philosophy is a lot about kind of understanding your own limitations, but also doing things to the best of your own ability. And the good thing about camp is that there are lots of things you can do at camp. So everybody can find their thing that they want to achieve. I have a list of all of these beautiful beautiful hand-painted boards that are all over camp. The walls and even some ceilings of the dining hall and the rec hall are covered with these award boards. I was never a person who had to paint boards, but Joan, you probably had to paint boards, no?
No. Never did. Have to have good handwriting.
I think there were stencils for some of them,
Some of them.
but I picked a few of my favorites because they had campers that I remembered on their boards. The one all the way on the right is a water ski that just hangs on the wall in the dining hall and gets painted with people's awards. The other tall skating one is the 50-mile swim. I know Jenny has her card back there from having started the 50-mile swim. You didn't get quite to 50, as I recall.
I'm sorry, Nick?
You didn't get quite to 50.
No. I gave it a good shot.
Sarah Raleigh, one of the directors, was apparently, so we are told, from her memory, the first person to complete the 50-mile swim. Apparently there was another camper that she was sort of neck and neck with, but Sarah managed to get there first.
Is that cumulative?
It was cumulative. I think you had 3 years to do it. Is that right?
2 or 3 years. to
Yeah.
do it.
I remember when Joan's daughter Angie finished hers. That was a big deal.
Do they have a marker of the lake that represents mile?
No, it's how you go back and forth.
Oh,
Yeah, you swim
okay.
laps in the swim area.
There's like,
If you came, when we were there, when we started, there were 2 sessions, maybe I'm getting ahead of Amanda here.
Oh, go ahead.
There, 4-week session or 8-week session, and as a camper, I was getting 4 weeks into my last year, and I went 8 weeks. And my point in telling you this is that if you're gonna do something like 50-mile swim or something like that, you probably had, it's not an excuse. You probably had a better shot at doing more laps, than, 4 weeks. But the thing is, I think you could do it at home, like if you were swimming in high school, and I think you could, isn't it a Red Cross thing or something? Anyway,
I think it was. I
if
don't
you
know.
were really dedicated, you could do it.
One of the Red Pine milestones that I actually did get to participate in is the Red Pine blanket. So you are awarded a Red Pine blanket at the banquet once you have been at camp for 32 weeks. So as Jenny said, most campers come for 4 weeks. So that means it takes you 8 years to get a Red Pine blanket. When you're a staff member, you're there for 8 weeks, so it only takes 4 years. But there are different vintages of Red Pine blankets. So mine is that red one in the front over there. And that was sort of the last of a batch of those. But Joan's is behind me, and Jenny's looks like Joan's. The ones that we have are all Pendleton wool blankets. My co-counselor, my last summer at camp, was allergic to wool. So she got one of the first ones that was fleece and then embroidered. And I'm not sure what they are like now. Do any of your grandkids have
I
one?
haven't seen one.
mine, oh yeah, they have this.
Okay.
But the recent ones are still, they're dark red now. And they're still wool, they're washable wool. And then I think they have something embroidered on them, probably not red.
Nice.
Still going strong.
Still going strong. Another Red Pine tradition that, I don't know, I might still be able to participate in, we'll see. I worked at camp for 7 summers, so I don't have one yet. But once you've been at camp for 10 years, you get a 10-year tree. Jones is over there in the back. It's just a little, lovely little red wooden pine tree that has your name and the years that you were at camp. Some years when we had a really ambitious arts and crafts director, they got bigger and had more elaborate paintings and things on them. But that's fun. So maybe at some point during my retirement years, I will work 3 more summers at camp and get myself a 10-year tree. This lovely piece of art was created by a camper and given to Sarah and Irene. I think the date up there is 1976. But this poem is a poem that I think probably means a lot to a lot of people who work at girls' camps. I know as I got to know people at camps around the country that this is a familiar favorite. It's called To an Old Camper. It's by Mary Edgar. The version that we had at camp was always in this sort of like old, falling apart book with very brittle pages that Sarah Raleigh would read from. And some of those lovely folks at the reunion in 2007 recorded Sarah reading the poem. And we might cry, but don't feel like you have to.
You may think, my dear, when you grow quite old, you have left camp days behind, but I know the scent of wood smoke will always call to mind little fires at twilight and trails you used to find. You may think someday you have quite grown up and feel so worldly wise, but suddenly from out of the past a vision will arise of merry folk with brown bare knees and laughter in their eyes. You may live in a house built to your taste in the nicest part of town, but someday for your old camp togs, you'll change your latest gown and trade it all for a balsam bed where the stars all night look down. You may find yourself grown wealthy, have all that gold can buy, but you toss aside a fortune for days neath an open sky, with sunlight on blue water and white clouds sailing high. For once you have been a camper, then something has come to stay, deep in your heart forever, which nothing can take away. And heaven can only be heaven in a camp in which to play.
That definitely takes me back. That poem is read at the candlelight ceremony, and I think it's always the last one read before we start to walk down with our campus. Is that poem familiar to anyone else?
Amy should remember.
I know I've come across other camps around the country where people know this poem when I reference it.
I think it's a classic. It really sums up your whole camp experience, I think.
Well,
wherever
so
you are.
let's talk about those things. What are the things that stay with us? And camp is a constant. There was a counselor when I was at camp, another counselor, who used to always say specifically that camp was her constant. That you come back to camp and it is pretty much the same every summer, but every camper gets a fresh start every summer, which is nice and special. And that camp is kind of the same, even though the world outside of camp can be really tumultuous. I know, there were several summers where counselors, when I was there, were alerted that, so-and-so had this tumultuous thing happen in their family, and maybe they would want to talk about it, or maybe they would need a little extra love and care through the course of the summer. And there are people at camp that can help with that. I think that, at least for us, camp experiences have sort of proven the value of women's and girls' friendships. And I want the two of you to talk a little bit about the group of you that all started doing your fun thing every year with Sarah and Irene.
Well, let's see, when was that? It started, oh, I know when it started, okay. 1987 must have been a long winter or something, but Sarah and Irene and a bunch of us counselors, friends, decided we would go away for a long weekend, and we all went to the Abbey Spa. Or wasn't that one? It was somewhere down by Milwaukee.
But it ended up being the Abbey home.
And when we're there, we're all sitting around thinking that this coming summer was going to be the 50th, 1937, 87. So we all got our heads together and figured out that we were going to have this big celebration for the 50th anniversary of camp. And since then, we have done that weekend. Now that we're all older and retired, we can do during the week, but at a spa down by Milwaukee, Madison area. So we've been there 38 years, I think. Same group.
Yeah. That sounds great. I want to find my camp friends to see if they'll go to the spa. many of them, their families still have summer homes in the area, so I get to see them when they're here. A few of them live here now, which is great. I think there's something about the way that we felt at camp that sort of draws us back to this place. Even though the place is a little bit different in the winter than it is in the summer, I gotta say I'm here for the winters. I love winter in Wisconsin. Oh, I remembered a thing that I wanted to talk about. The first summer that I worked at camp was the summer before I was going to college. I went to Wellesley, which is a historically women's college on the East Coast. But lo and behold, one of my fellow counselors at Red Pine that summer was also going to Wellesley. And the Alumni Association or whatever, there was an alum who lived on Lake Catherine in Hazelhurst. And she called my mom back in Marshfield where I grew up and said, well, you know, we're going to have this admitted students gathering. Would your daughter like to come? And my mom said, well, she's not here. She's at camp in Minocqua. And she said, well, that's even better. I'm in Hazelhurst. She called camp and she left a message with Sarah and Irene, because no cell phones at camp, no cell phones really at all back at that point. And I got the message at lunchtime that I was meant to call this nice woman back. And she invited me to lunch. And I said, well, there's another incoming Wellesley student who's not from Wisconsin, but she's going in the fall, and can I bring her along? And so we were released from camp for 2 hours so that we could go and have lunch with the nice lady. And then when I got to college, the very first person I saw on campus was the person I had spent the summer working at camp. We didn't plan it, we just happened to be there at the same time, arriving in our Midwestern minivans full of all of our stuff.
Yeah.
Jenny?
Just expounding on that, what's also interesting is, well, you can see we have our garb on, but sometimes if you're traveling and you maybe are wearing a sweatshirt or a t-shirt and you're just in a totally random place with people you don't know, and all of a sudden you'll meet somebody, oh, I went to Red Pine, and this happens a lot. And it's just part of another illustration of what Amanda's talking about with the connections. And when you go off to school, when you go off to college or back to high school or whatever, you end up meeting people that either went there or they knew somebody who went there or whatever. And that's really kind of a neat thing.
That happened to me once. I was coming back from a semester abroad. I was in the O'Hare Airport standing at baggage claim. I had a Red Pine patch on my backpack. And somebody's mom came and asked me if I had gone to camp. So what's going on at Red Pine today? Well, in 2007, after 70 years of family ownership and operation, a group of alumni expressed interest in owning the camp. And Red Pine was purchased by the Pleasant T. Rowland Foundation of Madison, Wisconsin. Pleasant is an alumna of Red Pine, and she's also an educator and author of children's reading and language arts textbooks, and probably most notably, the creator and founder of American Girl. So we have songs about all of the important folks in Red Pine history, and now there is a song about Pleasant, which is kind of fun when you come to camp tonight. On the left is the current director of Red Pine, who's been there since that transition in 2008. This is Connie Schofield, and then on the right is the incoming director, who was just announced this spring, and this is Colleen Fehrenbach-Kaiser. Her sisters or cousins were campers at the time I was working at camp. I think she might be even
Sisters.
sisters?
Yeah.
Yeah, sisters. But she was never my camper. I think I've met her once or twice. But she will be the next director of Red Pine and will co-direct with Connie through the summer of 2027. So Irene penned a song, a Red Pine song that is special to all of us, and so I'm going to end with that. Partly because when I was a senior in college, I needed an art project, and the letterpress printing lab at Wellesley College is one of my favorite places. And I also needed a thing for a scrapbook to celebrate Irene's 80th birthday, 50th summer at camp, something like that. we also have a recording of some alums singing the song.
May red pine, yours and mine, always keep us together. Bring us peace, perfect peace, courage in every endeavor. Reach out your hand and be my friend forever. May red pine, yours and mine, keep us together forever.
Okay, so that's what we've got to share with you about Red Pine history. But Joan is a very good keeper of the history. And so we have lots of fun camp stuff that probably Joan and Jenny can answer your questions about. Some of it we borrowed from the history cabin at Red Pine. Some of it is from people's personal collections. But there's lots of fun photos and memorabilia and all kinds of fun camp stuff. And if you have any questions about our camp, we'd love to tell you about it. And I want to hear what your camps were and what your camp experiences were, because now I know a lot of people in the camp industry. So I always ask when somebody says, "Oh, I went to camp. Where did you go to camp?" And all over the country, I have met people who went to camps in northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota. So thanks
How
for
many
coming.
girls went to Red Pine for the 4 weeks? Like, what was max capacity?
Max was about 135.
Okay.
Then we were squished.
Yeah.
That would be a really full camp.
Yeah.
And how many counselors for 135 campers?
The ratio was, what was it, 3 to 1? I'm not really sure.
In the early brochures, it says 5 to 1.
5 to 1.
That's definitely well within the guidelines of camp ratios. But I always remember staff being like 45-ish, plus like maintenance people and the ski boat driver and folks like that.
Excuse me, Amy, do you remember how many were in our cabin?
We had 2 counselors per cabin
Okay, that's what I thought.
at my age group. The younger kids had more,
Right.
but a minimum of 2. Like even the older kids had
Right.
2.
That's what.
But some of them were off in a staff building, like the horse
Yes,
rider.
the riding staff often got their own space and did
Or
not
the
have to live
boat
with campers.
driver, or, yeah. And then when the big trips happened, like the Canadian canoe trip, that was like 2 or 3 counselors that were leaving, so there was some shiftage to make sure cabins were covered.
And there was always at least one counselor in a cabin at night. They were never left alone.
Correct.
And,
The night Bazakis burned down, my counselor was in the bar there on the night off, Pat Lawler.
yeah, and
you.
me.
They came back the next morning to tell me, and I'm like, no, it can't be, it can't be.
Yeah, I know Pat and I can't remember who else was with us. Niemeyer, oh yeah. Yeah, that was quite a deal. We just finished dinner and, we were gonna head out and Pat was down on the dock and that's where it started.
Right?
There was, those docks were just soaked in oil and gas from over the years. And I guess it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, I think it was like a spark or something from a motor.
Yeah, Harlan was pumping gas into a boat, and the owner of the boat lit a cigarette.
Oh.
But Larry went through and with an axe, because he was fire chief at the time, cut all the boats loose, pushed them out.
Which was good.
And you guys jumped in the water because they started drifting back in
Oh,
and pushing them back out into the water.
yeah, it was,
When I had the opportunity to go to Red Pine, literally, Mr. Wittenkamp, which I knew as Dick Wittenkamp, but I'd call him Mr. Wittenkamp at camp, walked into my dad's business and said, Jake, we had somebody just cancel, would you like to send one of your daughters? And my dad called my mom, and Mom said, I think I can do it. She had 48 hours to go to Wausau, do all the shopping, get riding helmet, buy the riding boots, I mean, everything in 48 hours, and shoved me out the door.
On one of Joan's boards back there is a very extensive packing list.
Oh, yeah. And even like 2 days into camp, she showed up with the last few things that she missed. And then I had friends. I was there when I was 11, 12, 13, or 12, 13, 14. I had friends that worked at the local laundry, and they were doing my laundry. My name.
Because you have your name inside of all of them.
Yeah.
This sweatshirt is circa 2002, I think, and it does have my name in the back.
Yeah.
I had to dig it out of my camp box today.
Yeah,
Kelly, would you turn the lights up for us?
When Jenny was my counselor, she had this Winnie the Pooh that was a pajama.
I still have it.
I wanted one
I should
so
just give
bad.
it to you.
I wanted
I should give
it
it
so
to you.
bad. My mom searched and searched. I ended up with a Pooh Bear this big, but he didn't unzip in the back for pajamas. And now I have a few thousand Winnie the Poohs.
I love it.
Oh
I'm
my
giving it
gosh.
to you. I'm serious.
I have a room in my-
Debulking, so
Well, I
she's
should be.
up in the bedroom. My husband is like, what are we doing with this?
No, it was the best.
I mean, camp starts things for all of us, right? Like, I went off and made a career in camping, other people collected Winnie the Pooh, but.
Yeah, and Barbie Kibler had, she had brought her Pooh Bear. She had the whole stuffed one. Do you remember that? She would bring it, you know, she'd get off the train or bus or however, yeah.
Yeah, well, I ended up with this one that was like this big for Christmas Day.
Oh, wow.
And I still have it. But when I went to school in Whitewater, he would end up in the bars. Like, I would show up at a bar and he's sitting there already drinking, like. Yeah.
Jenny also had a certificate back there that she got, because her camp session was a Christmas gift. And so camp sent a little certificate that you could fill out and put under the tree in an envelope to say that you were giving someone camp as a Christmas gift.
That's what mine was my second and third year was street.
In current history, do the campers still mainly come from Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison area, or is it more all over the place now?
Is this the one that has all the people on it, or? Yes.
Turn around.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a very old sweatshirt, but this is when Red Pine Beach started to become global. Kids from everywhere in the world.
And I think that as people have, you know, as we have second and third generation campers, you know, maybe their parents grew up in the greater Chicago area,
Yeah.
but then moved to other places, and so now those kids come
Right.
from other places.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was a camper and then also a counselor, and we had, there was one girl who lived in California, and her cousins lived in California, I bet you remember, I mean, and her dad would fly her in, and it was a big deal, because we could all go down to the waterfront and watch your dad come in on his seaplane.
Oh,
And the
wow, how
trunk
fun.
and everything, and he'd pull her right up to the dock and unload her stuff. You know, and then there was another gal who, her father, they lived in Venezuela during the year, and then they sent her to camp. He was in, working for one of the big oil companies. But they sent her up here for the summertime. That was,
I
so they
remember.
were kind of starting from, coming from different places.
I remember one family, there were 3 daughters. And one was like 4.5 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
Well, mom and dad were going to Europe for the summer, so they sent their kids up to camp. And the oldest one was like my age at the time. But it was a big deal that that was the
Yeah.
youngest camper that the Whitten camps had ever taken in, and they were
That's
really
really
concerned.
Really,
Yeah.
I remember having a cabin group that was 3 sisters that were very young, and their family was moving while they were at camp.
Yeah.
They were only there for 2 weeks because they were I wanted to stay with them. They were like 6 and 7 and 9 maybe. But their parents were moving house while they were gone, and they were aware that it was happening, but
yeah.
but they needed to be someplace else.
Mine just remodeled while I was gone. I came home to like, what the? I always, like, Parents' Weekend was always a big deal because these parents would come up to visit their daughters at camp. It was so cool. Mine didn't. And I lived 11 miles away.
I think they've done away with it.
Yeah.
You know, because it could kids whose parents couldn't be there, whether they were traveling or whatever. And then, but I think for the most part, when you have somebody in your cabin who's in that situation, everybody just kind of adopted that person and, you know. worked
The
out.
pine cone auction.
We should tell them about that.
Oh, Pine Cone Auction is an evening program, so something that happens after dinner. And campers are told about it several days in advance because they need time to go out into the woods around their cabins and collect their pine cones. And then bid on things that the counselors will offer. I remember once doing a pine cone auction that was, that they got to come and we would paint their nails. So we bought like fun colors and nail polish and stuff. It was myself and the other counselor in my cabin. Or once I did some like craft or something, but
And some
I
of
don't
them
think it
were,
was that
yeah, some of
popular,
them-
but overnights or camp outs or
Camp
pontoon boat
overnights.
lunches or
Yeah.
But
trip
we
across
would-
to hike to the beach at Clear Lake.
Yeah.
We would
Yeah.
hide
Yeah.
the tiniest little pine cones, cause you could get like 1,000 or 2,000 in a lunch bag. You know, we had bags of them, waiting for that auction.
And then when it was all over, your counselors took them back out into the woods and dumped them.
I still think that was the Wittencamp's way of getting camp cleaned up.
Yeah.
All these pretty pine cones.
I think you are 100% right. Thanks so much for coming.
It was just, yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for coming and take a look, ask your questions about camp and